Elevating your toes when you're doing a deadlift doesn't mean you're targeting more hamstrings. It can, however, be a really helpful cue to those who are struggling to understand what a hip hinge is to get the movement pattern down. Because when we're doing the exercise right, we're gonna see more progress and more results from our time spent in the gym. Last week, I posted a few exercises in my story, and I asked if there was an exercise that I could further explain to get more out of your lifts. So we're gonna talk about why raising your toes doesn't mean more hamstrings, but it can be a helpful cue to get more out of your lift. When it comes to a deadlift, it's probably one of the most commonly misunderstood exercises because when we're watching somebody do it, it looks like they're just bending forward and standing up. So what that translates into is when we bend forward, it's a downward motion. When we stand up, it's an upward motion. Therefore, it's a vertical motion. But in reality, a deadlift is a hip hinge. Another example of a hip hinge is a bridge. So if you'll notice on a bridge, my hips are coming up and down. I'm squeezing my cheeks to raise my glutes, and I'm releasing my cheeks to lower my glutes. It's the same thing in a deadlift. The motion starts and ends in your hips. It's a horizontal motion with your hips, not a vertical up and down with your upper body. So when we keep that in the back of our head, that a deadlift is a hip hinge similar to a bridge that starts and ends in your hips, we can have a better understanding of how to execute that deadlift a little bit more efficiently. For example, we're gonna go ahead and push our hips back as far as we can go, allowing a soft bend in our knee, trying to keep our shins vertical. As my hips are pushed back, I feel tension in my glutes and in my hamstrings telling me I've bottomed out on my range of motion. Now, in order to stand up, I'm going to engage my glutes, squeeze them, and push my hips forward to stand. So it sounds easy enough, right? Push your hips back and push your hips forward. Horizontal motion, not an up and down motion. The problem is, once we get that movement pattern down, now it's time to add weight, and the weight is often oriented in front of us, which pulls us forward. As we continue to practice sticking our hips back and pushing our hips forward to stand, now we have an added challenge of trying to prevent that bar from dragging our upper body forward so our bar is really far away from our shins. What this means is we need a little bit of help understanding how to shift our weight back so we can sit our hips back so we can stretch our glutes and our hamstrings and get more out of the lift. So when we raise our toes, it helps cue our body to shift our weight back. So when we're taking that hip hinge, we are having an easier time pushing those hips back and pushing those hips forward to stand. It's not that raising your toes lengthens your hamstrings anymore and therefore targets your hamstrings anymore, but it can be a really helpful cue to help you shift your weight back to sit your hips back and push those hips forward in order to stand. If this was helpful for you, let me know in the comments section. Later on this week, I'll be posting a few exercises to see which exercise would be most helpful for me to explain. So follow along to keep those brain gains growing.